And welcome in to the Slump Monkeys Concrete Podcast, presented by Command Alcon. Celebrating 50 years of innovation in the concrete industry, they're proud to help producers solve today's challenges while shaping what's next for the heavy buildings materials industry. Please visit commandalcon.com to learn more. How about that, Josh Hare? My name is Paul Finley. We have a ride-along partner today, and I thought, what better way to start off the new concrete podcast than to grab a guy who's no longer in the concrete industry, but he was once the greatest producer of a concrete podcast show of all time. Josh Hare, welcome, man. Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks, man. I appreciate that introduction. I do miss certain things about the concrete industry, and I certainly miss our concrete podcast and all the fun we had together. But now you're the replacement. You're the Tom Brady coming in to sub out for the Drew Bledsoe, and sooner or later I'll be forgotten.
If you loved Add 10 Gallons, then you're going to absolutely be enthralled with Slump Monkeys Concrete Podcast. It's going to be a very similar feel to the show. We are focused on being smart, original, funny, and authentic. We think if we can stick to those core values, then we'll drive the audience. Add 10, it felt niche to like the podcast industry overall, but the community that got built was so tight and so expansive at the same time. I can't hardly go anywhere even today. I was just on a phone call last week with somebody I'd never met before who was trying to work together with me on something we're going to talk about here in a minute, actually. And I was like, oh, well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. And he goes, no need. I listen to the podcast.
That's the goal, man. That's why we started it.
That's why we started it, to have some fun. It was really
yeah.
fun.
I mean, I was privy to the numbers, and when we did start it wasn't really doing much at first, but it had like a real hockey stick projection as far as viewerships and stuff towards the end there. So glad you could start something else to kind of build on that.
Yeah, we're going to build on it. So if you'd like to join in on the new community, we welcome in all the Add 10 folks here. Please find us on LinkedIn at Slump Monkeys Concrete Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.slumpmonkeys.com. That's MONKEYS.com, slumpmonkeys.com. And a shout out to Command Alcon for being our first title sponsor. If you too would like to be a sponsor of the show, feel free to reach out to us at admin@slumpmonkeys.com. Again, that's MONKEYS. Admin@slumpmonkeys.com. I review them all personally. We sold out the title sponsorship through October. If you would like to jump on that list, November is available. We've got standard ad placements available as well. And couldn't have done it without the partner in crime here, Josh. We spent 5 years doing the other podcast. It built up the credibility. It built up the audience and allows us to do this today. Allows us to get this nice equipment. Allows us to put on events. See you guys at Concrete Works. We'll have announcements coming out for that as well, and opportunities to partner on that. So people are probably wondering, Josh, if you're not in the concrete business, but you're interested in being on the Concrete Podcast, what in the world are you doing right now? I can see you're sitting in a shop of some kind. So maybe explain. People are going to see this on YouTube. So maybe explain where you're at and what in the world you're doing over there.
I sell propane and propane accessories. No, I started my own metal fabrication and powder coating business here, and I'm in Northern Maryland now, so right on the border, hence the name Mason-Dixon Metalworks. Live in Pennsylvania, work in Maryland, so I thought that was fitting. But we service the region pretty much. I get down into the DMV area. I do a lot of weldments and metal manufacturing for, all types of contractors, millwork contractors, things of that nature. And then we've recently started doing a lot of work for local OEM manufacturers around the area. A lot of contracted parts, laser cutting, CNC, press brake, bending, tube cutting services, weldment stuff, plasma cutting, do all kinds of stuff for metal fabrication. And with it being a new business, if you've ever enjoyed spending massive amounts of money on equipment and tooling, get yourself into the metal manufacturing business, because it is a high barrier to entry, my boy.
Well, I think you just described the concrete industry.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thankfully for me, my business isn't quite as volume based as the concrete industry, but there is a volume based element to it where that new fancy CNC and automation equipment really comes into play. And that's where you make your money, being able to make 100 parts in an hour rather than five.
I hear you. I'm looking at that nice, clean, organized background you got. There's no way you did that on purpose. It's just how you live. And I'm looking at like the background of my podcast studio. And what I noticed is that each clip that I record or each interview that I record, like more stuff accumulates in the background of my studio. It's not on purpose. It's not. It's not like positive. It's so stacking up. So the question is, like, we're gonna get to episode 100, and there just be things like stacked to the ceiling behind me.
Look like a hoarders episode in there by episode 100.
Bro, I don't know. Did I ever tell you the house that we bought here back in 2023? Did it used to be a hoarder's house?
No, no,
Yes.
but yeah.
So it doesn't
Were you in
resemble.
charge of cleaning it out, or was that somebody else's?
Well, that was a 2010 project for somebody else. They came in and they spent like 130,000 of $2010 and did like a complete remake of the whole thing. Like it was so bad. I heard stories that it was so bad that the folks they had like there's an upstairs in this that's like a converted attic from when it was originally built, and there was like a hole, essentially just a hole in the roof, and nobody bothered to just fix it. They just put a trash can in there to collect the rainwater when it came through the hole in the roof. How I mean, that's insane, dude.
Yeah, I have a similar experience with that. When I lived in Baltimore, my house was technically a new construction. I looked at Google images of it before we closed on the house and stuff, and it was still from a couple of years previous. And same situation, hole in the roof, completely dilapidated, and they gutted that entire thing. I mean, all the way down to the studs. And when we went in there, it was new floors, new studs, new drywall, new electrical. It was basically a new house on a foundation from 1901, essentially is what it was. But they just went in there and gutted the whole thing because it was pretty much the same situation as yours.
Yeah. So I'm glad we got it post reno and we haven't had like any real issues or anything, just normal stuff. But what I did find in the door handle of this former quarter house, now turned beautiful estate, was a flyer. Hear that little flyer there? Save the area. Save the area. Apparently we're under attack, Joshua. Would you know that the attack is coming because they want to take this not it's not abandoned, it's shut down like steel factory that Cliffs owns in the town, and they would convert it to a 2 million square foot data center. And apparently that means the sky is falling and the world is coming to an end, that we want to repurpose old buildings to serve the modern economy. Now, I think I think this is fascinating for like multiple reasons that anybody would be against retrofitting an existing facility that's not contributing to the economy, it's just sitting there. There are people that like work in there just to make sure it doesn't like fall into disrepair, but that's it. It's not producing anything, it's not contributing in any way. And we can make it something awesome. And I'm like, yep, great. Let's go. Let's rock and roll. But I might be a little bit biased because this is like the market that I'm trying to serve on the concrete side. Like my initial constituents of what I'm doing are the hyperscalers, and they're building all these data centers. So maybe I'm biased. So I was like, all right, why? Maybe I'm crazy. So start traveling the country and talking with folks, and data centers come up without me bringing stuff up. And would you know it? I've not run into one person, not one person, who had a positive opinion about data centers being built in their community. Not one. Are you getting any buzz out there in Central PA about data centers, the hype, scare? Is it real out there for you?
Yeah. Yeah, because where I live now is up closer to Harrisburg. I'm in Dillsburg, which is essentially like, right between like the Gettysburg area and the Camp Hill Harrisburg area. So it's closer to Route 81, which is a major shipping route already. And there's, massive 3 million plus square foot warehouses there for your retailers and stuff like that. But there's plenty of farmland up there that's close enough to metropolitan areas. And there's a few that are proposed to go up there, and there aren't too many who are happy with it, if any. But I don't necessarily, in my opinion, and I'll speak for myself and for the people, or in my closer circle, we're not necessarily opposed to the construction itself, but we're opposed to what the data centers potentially represent as
Um,
far as
what does that mean?
the surveillance state that comes with the increased abilities of the data centers.
Mm. Okay, so not fans of Palantir on the program today. So when I think of what the data centers represent, they represent literal inference and compute. And in order to serve the needs of the artificial intelligence, we've got to have more inference and more compute. Are you like a daily user, daily driver of any of these, um, whether they're LLMs or video models or multi-model AIs? Are you using any of this stuff?
Yeah, on a basic level. On a basic level, because my design work is mostly 2D. I do get into 3D modeling sometimes, but most of the stuff that I'm doing, it's all 2D stuff. So there is an element that I can use AI for some things, but I'm not using it to the scale that other like engineering firms and stuff like that would be.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm certainly using it.
So this is where I think the disconnect is. And I listen to a lot of and read a lot of articles, listen to a lot of podcasts about people who are AI positive, and I fall into that camp as well. And I think the disconnect is folks that maybe aren't using any of these AI products for anything other than like a better version of Google searching.
Oh
And
yeah. Yeah.
and it's fun,
And
but
actually I would say that's the majority of AI users.
it is on like the consumer side. So
Correct. Yeah.
guys that are just, let me just search up something real quick. It's the vast majority of uses on the consumer side are just that. Let me search something up. The On the enterprise side is different. And this is the side that I find myself in, although I'm not an enterprise, but I use it for work. And you say, oh, Paul, are you just sending out AI slop all the time? No, I had I joined my new businesses here, and I was used to having Salesforce. And as much as you and I hated logging stuff into Salesforce with a passion, when you are in charge of like all the things, you're like, oh, dang, Salesforce rules. I really need to keep track of all this, and I need a repository for that. And I wished I'd have had it because like the guy who was retiring, it was like the lead sales guy retired. And I was like, where's all your information? He's like, oh, it's on my computer.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. All right. Well, send me everything you've got. Now I've got 6,000 files I need to go through and learn the relationships and learn the history of these accounts. And none of it's just like it's there. It's not like it's magical contact list. So I called Salesforce and I was like, I need help. They said, great. It'll be $1,000 a month just to have the service. And then if you need like to import everything or need to build out the frameworks or you need to do whatever, we're going to charge you $200 an hour to work with somebody to get all that done. I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. All right. Well, signed up for a trial, went through, I just did everything myself. We called Terminator, old IT buddy there. She helped me out a little bit. I got some things built around. And then I was like, maybe AI could help me. And that's what really started my journey on using it for more than just search queries. And I went in and I'm AI pilled at this point. I built a freaking awesome CRM that does all the things that Salesforce did for us and more. And it cost me like $200, maybe not even that. It was probably less than that in AI credits that I never have to pay ever again. It's a standalone app. There's no API fees, there's no billing, there's no tokens. It built an app and it built a CRM and it's freaking awesome. And so then I was like, oh, well, what else can I build? And then I just started building all kinds of stuff. Dude, I've got all kinds of things that help me be more productive on a daily basis. I'm 5 times the person I was before as far as capabilities. With understanding that it's helping me do things, but it's like having a partner that has a lot of knowledge, like a lot of book knowledge, but it doesn't always have like a lot of real world knowledge. So you can't just be like, "Hey, little agent bot that I made, go do all my things for me," because he'll make errors that are where he's like 95% right, but like that 5% that's wrong is so wrong that like you lose all your credibility. So you can't just have him out there like replying to all your emails. You can't have him, writing all your things for you. You have to be like, "All right, help me," and then it takes me. I can get infinitely more done by checking the work of what he's done versus having to create everything from scratch. It's an absolute game changer for me. And so I'm like, yes. And then every time a new model comes out and it's more powerful, it's like, holy cow. Like it's way better. It's giving better stuff. It's everything. But every model release, I'm like, this is fantastic. Like, how is everybody not going crazy with this and doing all the things? And then all I see from everybody I talk to is like, doomerism. Yeah, our electricity's gonna go up. Yeah, they're gonna ruin the water supply. Yeah, have you heard it makes a humming noise? I'm like, does it really? Yeah, you hear it 3 miles away. Like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And it's just all doom and gloom all the time. I think if people were doing the things I was doing, they'd be trying to fund the data centers and get this stuff to be faster and more awesome. Are you working with anybody else that's doing all the things I just mentioned?
Yeah. Yeah, and to a degree, I would imagine a lot of these larger companies, whether it be Salesforce or any web developing company or something like that, they're utilizing AI tools and they're passing the cost on to you, the consumer. So whether you do it yourself or you go to a firm that helps you do certain things from the admin side or design side or whatever, I mean, you're using it one way or another, whether you know it or not. But there is a lot of doomerism out there from people that don't grasp the concept or the benefits of the service. A lot of people are just kind of scratching the surface, and it's a relative unknown. There's a lot of ways you can equate what's going on now with the AI boom and data centers to like the .com era of the early 2000s, or late 90s, early 2000s. And there's a lot of unknowns there. There's a lot of misinformation, not to steal that term, but people are unsure and unaware and kind of unknowing of the possibilities. And to a certain degree, people are right to be skeptical, but just because you're skeptical doesn't mean you're right necessarily all the time. But as far as how they implement these data centers, I think repurposing older warehouse buildings that are not in use, that's probably the best idea I've ever heard of. I mean, rather than taking just a barren piece of land in Utah or something like that, I mean, you have vacant buildings in Detroit that are dozens, at least 10 blocks large. You know what I mean? So, I mean, repurposing older buildings like they're trying to do around your area, that's the best idea I've heard of thus far. I think power generation, of all the things, I think power generation is probably one of the biggest hurdles. You got to do something because our current grid system just doesn't have the juice to meet the demand. And if anything comes out of this, it might be deregulation for the power industry, whether it's, starting to look at different ways of generating power through small, salt nuclear reactors, stuff that was taboo a couple years ago. Maybe you're implementing new technology that's been available, but no one's been willing to stick their neck out. And one of my favorite sayings is, you'd be amazed at what you can do when you have to. So maybe it's a situation like that. And I don't know if you've noticed her, Paul, but a lot of these environmental people have been real quiet lately.
Yeah.
When they,
Yeah. Well, I think we just jumped straight into the power stuff. That's exactly where I wanted to go with that. You read my mind because in this Doomer flyer that we got in our door handle,
I'm
they
sorry,
list
did you say boomer or doomer?
it's probably both. They're organizing on Facebook, so who knows, man. And this person is it's funny, man. It doesn't look like someone who maybe I don't know could be a foreign national passing this out, but they listed 60 reasons why like having a data center in your backyard is negative. And the one that I am legitimately concerned about is exactly what you mentioned, power generation. If if we're starved for power in this country, then why would we tax that and put ourselves at risk? And so I went digging and I found out some really, really interesting stats. First off, I would And it's okay if the answers are wrong. You're meant to not know all the answers. And how much of the current electrical generation do you think is taken up by all of AI in the United States at the moment?
As far as
As far as a
percentage of total
percentage of
usage,
total usage of the American electrical consumption.
eh, a quarter to a third.
5%.
Okay.
5% of the country's electrical demand is taken up by the AI data centers, about 30 gigawatts of continuous runtime. The data centers are forecasted to probably double next year. So at current grid capacities, assuming nobody builds anything at all, 18 months from now, it would be 10% of the country's load, December 31st, 2027. Sure hope we're building other centers. So then the question is, all right, so every layer of the supply chain for building a new data center is constrained. Everything's backlogged. There's not one part of it you can get where you're like, yep, I want to stand up a data center tomorrow. So the question is, which one do you tackle first? And I love the idea of these nat gas turbines. Did you know there's only two companies that make the blades for those turbines, and they're backlogged 4 years? So now the
Bet they are.
hyperscalers are trying to build like their own turbine blades and stuff. But let's get back to the idea of like, all right, what if we had them tapped into the current grid and we don't want them to take another 5% chunk? And so are there any other options? And Construction Dive actually had a really nice article about it where they said, what if the AI centers could be flexible? What if the demand of all this inference, and to define that quickly for folks, is inference is when the AI is thinking and outputting. So that actually gives you something. And during that thinking and outputting, is there a way to lessen the load? Can you spread it out? So let's say you're in Texas, that's the closest data center to you is another one in Texas, and you submit your project to AI and it goes into the data center in Texas. But that area is a pretty high demand because it's the middle of the day in Houston in July and it's 110 degrees outside and everybody's got the AC cranked up. And it says, hey, why don't we shift this to Illinois where it's 80 degrees today? And they can do that. They can shift they can route where the inference actually needs to happen so that they take less power from the local grid. And then there was an interesting report from Goldman Sachs, and I found this fascinating about like, where is the demand at? Number one, I don't think this would be a giant surprise to everybody. Number one is Texas. More data centers being built in Texas. Lower regulations are allowing for the construction of data centers. They're seeing a lot more energy demand. Texas has its own grid, so they tie in pretty easily. So I don't think it's any surprise. Would you guess that number two is Virginia?
I knew that actually, but yeah, I mean, it's a densely populated area with a lot of business and a lot of government buildings there.
A lot of government buildings. Number three, Ohio.
Yeah,
Again,
I'd have lost that bet.
so again, it's regulation. So when I was at the Pennsylvania Aggregate Concrete Association meetings last year, the number one talk was like, hey, we got to convince the government to deregulate because we're going to lose everything to Ohio. And I thought that was really interesting. I'd never thought like the states were thinking like that on an individual level that, hey, we're going to lose to our neighbor state because they just cut all the regulations for building stuff. It wasn't even just data centers, building anything. And like, we got to do that in Pennsylvania. And then the number one forecasted state for largest growth of data center construction, drum roll please, that would be the state of Georgia will come in as the fastest grower. So super interesting that data centers are a hot topic right now for all kinds of reasons. I'm fired up about them. I'd love to see them get constructed as quickly as humanly possible. So if you're in Texas, Georgia, Ohio, or Virginia, you've probably got one near you or coming soon. Now, with the discussion about electricity, we get into the meat of why our friend Josh Hare has joined us on this podcast. So, Slump Monkeys is owned by us, it is made for us. And when you have that type of control, you get to do recurring segments that interest you because we think it's awesome. The segment that we're running with our friend Josh Hare is called Conspiracy Corner. I'm so fired up about it. Conspiracy Corner. I love a good conspiracy theory. And Josh Hare knows more about conspiracy theory than anybody I've ever met. There is one rule on this podcast that there's two rules on the podcast. We don't cuss and we don't talk politics. We're going to hold to that rule. We're not going to cuss and we're not going to talk political conspiracy theories. So if you wanted to argue today about left and right, I'm sorry, this isn't the place for you. But if you want to learn about new conspiracy theories, we're not talking about did we go to the moon? Of course we didn't. Are everything is real? Of course they are. Those aren't conspiracies to me. But Josh has some good ones. Josh, what are we leading off with for Conspiracy Corner July 1st, 2026?
Well, we're leading off with the fact that you cut me off at the knees by saying no politics. That's like 80% of my good conspiracies are tied to political agendas. But no, for the first one, it's not the juiciest conspiracy per se, but we get to talk about one of my favorite humans of all time, and that is Nikola Tesla. And there are a few conspiracies surrounding Nikola Tesla and the work that he did or didn't do, patents that he may have given off to, other students that were working under him and so on and so forth. But did you know it is alleged and pretty heavily corroborated at this point that Nikola Tesla had designed a death ray during his lifetime? And we're going to talk about that today. It was officially called the Teleforce ray. Tesla didn't like it referred to as a death ray, but that kind of grew legs when the newspapers got a hold of his idea. And it was a proposed weapon that projected a concentrated stream of particles. Nowadays we have, laser beams and things like that. Of course, that wasn't the case in the turn of the 20th century during the Industrial Revolution. But what it essentially did was it concentrated a large amount of particles in a super small area. The differentiation between Tesla's because there were other scientists and physicists rather working on stuff like this during that time period, but over long distances, the strength of that ray would fall off dramatically. Whereas the differentiation in Tesla's allegedly was that his ray would maintain power over long ranges, being able to, shoot down, airplanes and incoming bombs and things like that out of the sky from long distances away.
Wow. So when you texted me last week, I purposely didn't Google any of this. I actually tried to go to the library and get a book on Nikola Tesla. I was like, do you have any biographies on this man? Because this is how excited I am about this segment. And I wanted to learn as much as I could about the guy before we got on here. You know what the library told me? They told me, no, we don't have any books on him.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. So not only did they...
That's unfortunate.
Not only are they covering up his space lasers, but they're now trying to get rid of all evidence of our friend Nikola Tesla or Nikola Tesla.
Well, all speaking of evidence, that's where the conspiracy comes in.
Yes. Let's go.
So during the exploratory phase, when Tesla was designing this and hashing things out on a theoretical basis, he was looking for funding and support. Initially went to the U.S. government and
as one does when you want to build giant space lasers. All the US government.
That's what Elon did. Worked out for him. He got all the money he needed to build his rockets.
Yeah, and now he's building the data centers in space, which is pretty cool. So it's all connected, full circle here.
Yeah, money seems to find that guy. It's interesting,
dude. But not just a little either.
Yeah, he approached the U.S. government, but not just the U.S. government. After they shut him out, he went to the Soviet Union and other certain government entities. Yeah, he didn't just shout this out to the U.S. government. Yeah, and that's the pinch point.
That was his mistake.
Probably not a good idea because we're talking about World War I era, and then when Tesla finally passed away, which was, I got it written down here, 1943, that's World War II. So he passed away during World War II, and what happened was at the time, there was a legislative authority called the Office of Alien Property.
Let's go.
Yeah, the Office of Alien Property were at his room there at the New Yorker Hotel in Manhattan, where he had lived for about the last 9 years of his life. And, obviously Tesla had a touch of the tism, and everything in his apartment there was meticulously maintained. Everything was cataloged, and he had all of his documents in trunks. And even there was at least one safe, maybe two. So they went in there, scooped that stuff up, and was gone within hours.
No.
Yeah, and the reports are weird because some reports you read that the Office of Alien Property, they had somebody in there within hours, and then other reports say that they were like, 1 or 2 days after his passing, they came. So there's a window of time there where there's a discrepancy on who was the first person there and when or how soon were they there after, his death was reported.
Well, even so, back in, I mean, you're talking 100 years ago. So even if that means they like the tech, there wasn't technology then. Someone would have to like be in contact with the government and say, "Hey, Tesla finally died. Come get your boy." Or they had eyes on him
Yeah.
and they were watching him because they considered him a danger and a threat. And he croaks, and they're like, "All right, old boy didn't come down for breakfast today. Let's roll."
Yeah.
Got in and took everything. So why you think the government came in? The conspiracy is that the government came in right after his death, denied him the ability to build the lasers, then upon his death, scooped up all the information so nobody else could get to know how to build the lasers, including foreign government and adversaries.
Right. Yep, that's right. And once they recorded his belongings that were seized, they eventually did give those records back to the family, which most of those records now reside in the Tesla Museum. The Tesla Museum being Yugoslavia. So there is, which I believe was his home country. There is a Tesla Museum in Yugoslavia that has all of his records, and they're cataloged, and you can kind of go in and tour that. But to many accounts, especially his family, not all the records were returned. Federal government hung on to some stuff. The
Yeah, of
interesting
course they
thing here
did.
is there were reported that 3 people entered his apartment initially. John Newton, which was from the New York Office of Alien Property, another officer from the Washington Office of Alien Property, and John G. Trump was the third person. So President Donald J. Trump's uncle was a professor at MIT, and he was actually the first student under Robert Van de Graaff, the inventor of the Van de Graaff generator. Did a lot of work with electrical currents and power generation and such. Depending on which Reddit forum you read, which I don't tend to read too far into those, I'm not that heavy of a conspiracy theorist, although I'm an interested bystander for most parts. But some reports say that John G. Trump was there about 2 hours after the death of Nikola Tesla, and then the Office of Alien Property came in about 2 days later. That's where the conspiracy starts to turn and you know get into theoretical situations. Did all 3 of those gentlemen show up at the same time, or was the MIT professor there about 2 days earlier? That's the true conspiracy here.
Wow, man. So the Trumps, the MIT connection, secret government organization stealing people's personal files. We've got it, and space lasers. We've got it all. What a fun conspiracy theory! I'd never heard that before. This is why we bring on folks like Josh Hare, fill us in on conspiracy corner. What's your favorite part about this Nikola Tesla conspiracy?
Nikola Tesla's work as a whole. Nikola Tesla started working under Thomas Edison. He was a student of Thomas Edison. They went their separate ways. Edison was working on DC power, and Nikola Tesla presented alternating current, AC power. And as Nikola Tesla was trying to develop this as the primary power source for, the entire world, General Electric, who was funding Thomas Edison, they had a significant campaign to discredit Nikola Tesla. So throughout his entire career, as great as Tesla was at every turn, he faced huge opposition from JP Morgan, General Electric, Thomas Edison himself, and the greater scientific community that was, enjoying the fruits of properly funded projects through these larger companies after during the turn of the Industrial Revolution. So as great as Tesla was, he did all that despite the fact that he faced immense challenges from his colleagues or competitors, or however you want to categorize them. So there's a lot of Tesla's work through wireless transmission using frequencies of naturally occurring inanimate objects. It's alleged that he would be able to like knock buildings down by matching their frequency and vibrating the building at very high speeds, like being able to do stuff like that. In layman's terms, being able to basically plug a probe into the ground and generate power from the earth itself. That's pretty widely known at this point, but he went to various business owners to get funding for these projects. So he'd go to General Electric and say, hey, I got this idea to be able to stick a probe in the ground and be able to generate electricity no matter where you are. And as legend has it, their famous response to him was, well, where would we put the meter? So my favorite part about Nikola Tesla in general, and basically any conspiracy theory that's tied to him, is what he was able to accomplish, theoretical and otherwise, despite the massive pushback that he got from his peers.
Gee, that's man, what a guy, what a life. And we know the earth is conductive. That's why we have grounds. And then
Right.
and then the thing about the vibrating, being able to match the frequency of whatever the solid item is so that you could then displace it. That idea, where I first heard that idea on a little known television show called Ancient Aliens,
Yep.
who described it. That was how they moved all the giant granite blocks for building of the pyramids in Egypt.
Yep.
Acoustic.
Yeah, we'll never know, which is really what makes the conspiracy stuff fun.
That is what makes it fun, man. I'm glad you're here to go through it all. One other thing I want to announce that is also fun, or it actually is fun. But I am so excited about this next advertiser. I cannot say enough good things about Mr. Manny Tejano. He is just salt of the earth. He's got a company called Rocket Start. You can visit them at gorocketstart.com, but I'm going to tell you how freaking awesome this company is. We have lambasted on this show, well, sorry, our previous show, for 5 years about how hard it is to get truck drivers for your concrete plant. How everything, when someone talk about a driver, it always seems so negative. But the value of a good driver, having a guy that really knows what he's doing, oh my gosh, can't hardly put a price on it. But it's a really hard thing to recognize and reward. Manny figured it out. Manny has a system at Rocket Start where he gamifies the employment, and specifically the employment of truck drivers. Now, maybe there's other roles that could use it, but the drivers are what fascinate me. And it's almost like fantasy football, but for your work. And these guys come in and your company like sets up Rocket Start, and these folks get recognized for, oh, you showed up 5 days in a row. Here's a badge. 10 days in a row, 15 days in a row, 20 days, 30 days. You got a month. They get recognized, and then they get rewarded in real time, and they can cash in gift cards that come through this site. Oh, by the way, you washed out your truck after your fifth load of the day, but then, oh, we had a truck breakdown. Could you please get back under the chute and haul one more for us? Thought your day was done. Sorry. Need you to take one more. Yeah, man, I got you. Boom. Recognized, rewarded instantly. And it's for everybody to see. So that when not just the bosses, but your peers come back in the next day and they're like, oh man, Johnny took that load yesterday. That was cool, man. Appreciate you doing that. That's awesome. And there's a leaderboard. Who took the most loads? Who did the most for others? Who came in and did all the things they were supposed to do without complaining, and they got rewarded for it. Guys are taking vacations off the amount of rewards they're getting with this program. Couldn't be more thrilled to see somebody who's trying to engage, retain, and motivate a workforce through gamification done by recognition incentives, and it's visible for everyone. If you'd like to learn more, please go to gorocketstart.com. Ask for Manny Tejano. It's a fantastic human being. Gorocketstart.com. Josh, thanks again for joining us here on the program. We are going to send it over to our first interview of the show. We have the great and powerful Justin Lazenby from Thomas Concrete as we get into all things current in his world and in ours.
Yeah, appreciate the invite. Should be cool to try to do this again, see what we can figure out in this wonderful world of concrete.
I mean, it's cool every time we do it, but what I like more about this time is we've actually been working together lately, and man, it just feels so good.
Yeah, it's kind of like old times, it kind of feels like the mid 2000s again. It's like, hey, what's new in the concrete world that's actually just something that we've been doing for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of is what it is kind of what we're doing. I mean, it's not even reinventing the wheel. It's like we're taking the wheel that somebody already made, and we're like, should we use this wheel again?
It's crazy. I mean, as we've kind of went down this road, people's like, oh, this is new technology. It's like, but it's not. This is kind of tried and true technology. It's just people are finally realizing it's time to use it.
Well, it's tried and true. We say that, but okay, well, let's go ahead and explain to everybody what we're doing. So, if for those that don't know, I left Active Minerals at the beginning of the year to take another opportunity that was put in front of me. Couldn't say no. One of the roles in the new opportunity is a startup company that went about it in an interesting way, and they said, "Hey, we're going to buy this idle plant, and we're going to convert it to make calcined clay." So perfect. There's a market for that, and it's in Georgia. So working with Justin's pretty natural that that's going to happen. And the idea of using metakaolin or calcined clay in concrete is not new. It's been around a long time. But what is new to me and what I didn't realize before like jumping over into the dark side was back in the day, I would never use more than like 8% metakaolin in a concrete. Just it was nasty. And we're using like 30, 35, 40% cement replacements with this calcined clay. I mean, what is it about 2026 that's different from 2016 when I wouldn't have even approached double digits?
Yeah, I think we've all gotten to a point now with the cement changes and everything. We've all become a little more aggressive than we used to be, probably. We aren't just resting on those laurels of, hey, this is what's normal. You and I have seen that forever. You've dealt with me. I love to push the envelope. How far can we go? Let's make it blow up and then let's back off a little bit. So I think everyone's kind of gotten to that point now to where it's like, hey, how far can we go with this? And when you start pushing things that far, I think you realize, hey, this actually works really well with these numbers. It doesn't, are there some challenges? Yeah. I mean, it gets sticky when you get those high percentages in there, but now the admix guys and all those guys have started to do things for these types of products to where it's making it a little more tolerable.
Well, I think talk about like being aggressive. I had to be open-minded as the company that's like producing this stuff, and to go in and be like, oh yeah, it's okay to add all this extra water, like 40 gallons of water to a truck. Like, yeah, that's okay. You're going to be fine. Never in my life have I ever said we needed more water to get our strengths.
Yeah, I think what you're learning with some of these materials is that water cement ratio doesn't mean the same thing it used to. I think as we look at these things, some of these things just need higher water contents to work. I think that's even true with some of the cements now. They just need more water to actually be tolerable and be easier to use. And I think that's probably the key there is the strength's always better when you push the water out. But I think to make these things more user friendly, the water's key. And I mean, it's the best thing for everyone there. I mean, with that, the water makes it easier to finish. The water makes it easier to control set. I mean, there's just so many variables there to go away with that.
I mean, I've been talking to people for a couple of years whose thesis was like, I think our mixes are water starved, but 20 years, we spent 20 years of R&D trying to see how low can we go on the water cement ratio and throw in the chemical. Are you saying, are we saying like, hey, that's wrong, or hey, there's just another way to do it, and these other materials are going to usher that era in?
No, I think both of those are actually right. I think some mixes you do have to starve them for water, and I think in others you don't. I think a lot of it depends on the makeup of what's in the mix, how we're actually making that concrete, what's the end goal. If you're dealing with things to where you don't have to finish it, yeah, you can do some really cool things, pushing water out of it, get content, binder contents down really, really low. And when you do that, it works for what they're looking at. But if you've got to finish it, it's kind of a different scenario where you've got to make it workable. And that's, I think 1L taught us that. I think that's one of the things people might be a positive when the 1L deal finally settles wherever it settles is that 1L has taught us that, hey, just because everything else seems to perform the same, if strength's the same, hey, there still is that finishability side, and we've got to do things to attack that side as well.
I mean, word on the street is folks are trying to go back to Type 1 too.
It definitely has that feeling. It definitely.
Well, I can't blame anybody. The imports that are coming in are all Type 1 too, and everybody is like, oh, I can get Type 1 too from Turkey or Greece or wherever. Yeah, send it.
Yep. Definitely have disruptors in the markets there. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with 1L. There's definitely challenges. It's different. But I think if you've got the right people and the right people working on things, you can make both work. It's just how the cement market's going to be, and we'll see. We said it was all going to change, and we're going to see a bunch of different cements, and I don't think anyone had going back to 1-2 as the first thing on their bingo card, but I think it's where we're at.
Yeah, I certainly didn't. But so we're getting into some of these creative mixes. What I couldn't believe, and what I still don't have an answer to, and I don't know if anybody has like the exact answer, but I want to talk about it for a second, is how low can we drive the ordinary Portland cement in the ratio of Portland to SEMs? And right now we're getting lower than I ever thought we would see in a commercial grade concrete mix design.
I think it's how much will someone allow you to. I mean, we've done some mixes here where they have 0 Portland in them and are not your typical deals where you need alkaline activators and all that, and actually been over 10,000 PSI with those types of mixes. So, I mean, I think it's very doable. I think getting down in the 10 to 15% range is going to be fairly easy over the next little while. It's just having someone that's willing to listen and understand, hey, there are going to be differences with this. If you're dealing with foundations, these things become super, super easy. But if we're something that's finishable, it's going to probably tame those numbers a little bit. But I think the key there is just how open are people to doing it.
So it's interesting. So, okay, great. This is going exactly where I was wanting to go, because I have two sort of like data points, and they don't necessarily mesh in my brain. So maybe you can help me out here. The conventional thinking is that with these SCMs, that they are utilizing the byproduct of cement hydration. So the calcium hydroxide that is released and is in pore solution is then reacting with not all pozzolans act this way, but a lot of them do, and it's reacting with those pozzolans, and they're either forming a CSH or a CASH, and that is contributing to the strengths. But I have seen mixes in the mining world that were 90% slag and 10% Portland, and they were still getting the strength that they need. Now, they weren't high strength commercial grade mixes, but they were still getting the strength that they needed. And now you're saying you've got mixes that are 0 Portland and don't have an alkali activator in them, and you're still getting what you need. So, I mean, I'm having a tough time squaring that circle where we think that these SEMs need the calcium hydroxide, but there are mixes out there that show that might not be true.
Yeah, I think the key there is kind of double-edged sword there. So the second one you talk about with, like, especially with slag will get hard. It is a cement. It's not truly, when we talk about SEM, it's not typically a pozzolan or any of that. It will gain strength on its own. There's a few things you can do there chemical wise to really get it going, and it works well. When it comes to the SEMs, I mean, go back to everything we've always known about concrete. We never hydrate, a third of the cement. You hydrate a third of the cement, you've done really, really well. And when we add the SEMs, we're hydrating more, but that doesn't mean we need more. So I think that's what we're learning now is that we can load these things up with SEMs, and we may, it's probably something someone a lot smarter than me needs to look at is that, if you look at it under a microscope, when we get to 60% or 70% SEMs, how much of that actual, normal Portland are we actually hydrating? I guarantee you that number is going to be a lot higher than what we traditionally saw in our older concretes. And I think that's what's driving a lot of that forward is with these SEMs, you don't need the waste of the cement on that side to actually get your workability, your finishability, and all that we threw cement in there before to do. I think that's what we're really starting to see is that that when we're looking at these things, it's not that we don't need the cement. It's just that we're able to make that cement so much more efficient.
And all that makes sense in the sense of like, what was the cement being used for? And it's not just that it's being used to gain strength; it's being used for workability. And because you got to be able to consolidate these things, and out in the field, and you just got people and rakes and come alongs. You got to be able to move it and consolidate it. Because you go back to the block industry, their cement levels are so low on a volume basis because they're consolidating with these huge vibratory presses. And so and they're water starved even worse than any concrete you've ever seen. So we know for sure that if you can get just enough cement to hold something together and you're not worried about how it finishes, you really don't need much.
No, I mean, it's the same thing, same premise there when you talk about like roller compacted concrete. Cement contents are down fairly low on those. So I think that's what we're learning. I think we're evolving. I think we're just kind of on one of those really kind of the edge of a breakthrough on some of that stuff is that as we see all these SEMs come to market and we're able to do more and more with them, we're just going to become way more efficient over time.
Well, how many of these different SEMs have you been testing? Because our stuff's like a calcined clay. It's a metakaolin product. And so, it's pretty standard stuff. But
yeah,
you're doing crazy stuff.
Yeah, we're testing anything and everything just like normal. I mean, it's kind of our normal MO around here when we get the chance to look at things. I think we've got one job that we're looking at currently that we're going to do 5 different novel products on. So that's a blink of the eye of where these things come from. And you get someone who's willing to look at them, it makes a big difference. I mean, when you've got those partners that are willing to really take a chance and say, hey, let's see what this does in real concrete. I mean, what's the worst thing that happens? If it doesn't work, then we move on. If it does, we may be on something big.
So in this scenario, it's not Thomas Concrete coming forward and saying, hey, I think we need to use these new things. You've got customers that are pulling you along and saying, hey, we want to use new technology. Can you find out what the best thing is? And let's talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's twofold. We're looking at a lot of things ourselves and we've got a lot of data on things there, and we've shared some of that data, and then they come back to us and they're like, hey, we've looked at X, Y, and Z, and we really like some of the data they've got. And we're starting to look at things that, may and may not make sense. There's some things out there that probably aren't as viable as other products, but, it's kind of interesting, to look at some of the stuff we are, but, it's different and it's fun all at the same time, but it is uber stressful at the same time as well, because when it doesn't work, who's to blame? I mean, that's kind of the old adage there. And we don't want to have that being a huge problem for everybody.
I mean, that's the joy of concrete, man. Because, I saw a meme just the other day. They're like, it's okay if you mess up. Don't worry. It's just permanent and forever.
Yeah, exactly.
placing concrete and screwing it up, because tearing it out, nobody wants to tear it out.
And that's been the key, is finding some of these guys that are willing to do, stuff that's temporary. They've got like a little laydown yard, let's put some there and kind of see what it does. Or, if it's something that's not structural, if you're building an outdoor lunch area, that's probably a good area to do something really creative with concrete, because you may be able to really push the envelope, because if it's foot traffic, and all that, it's a lot easier to have issues there than where a building's actually at.
If you're watching the YouTube version of this, you just saw my screen light up with light, like God just came down from the heavens. But really, this it's one of those ring lights that freaking influencers have, and I have never felt like worse about myself in my entire life than standing at the checkout buying a ring light.
Paul said if this doesn't work out, he's going to start doing YouTube videos on how to do makeup. My daughter will be happy to jump in there with you.
I did. So my daughter doesn't do makeup. She's not allowed to have any of that. She's also 10. But the idea of being a YouTuber, she loves it so much. So she sees my podcast studio and goes nuts. And she was helping me. The kids these days are crazy, man. She was helping me edit the podcast, because I did a couple practice ones just to get used to the software. And, folks don't know all the technical challenges we had starting this morning. They don't have to know that part, but it actually, if they did know, they'd be like, oh yeah, this is definitely be run by concrete guys, not podcast influencers. And so I did a couple of practice ones where I didn't have a guest, and she came in and was like, I was trying to learn the editing tools. She's like, can I try? I'm like, sure, can't go any worse. Dude, she had it figured out in an hour. And then not only did she have it figured out, but then she made me a 20-minute video, like on the podcast software, explaining to me how to edit the podcast.
There's nothing that'll make you feel older. Yesterday, I'm like, hey, Savannah, show me how to fix this on my phone. And it's like, how did I become the old guy who doesn't know how to use his phone all of a sudden? It's crazy.
Dude, crazy. She had it figured out so fast. So then she heard that I was recording today. She was like, she can't wait to get back from camp. So she's like, I'm going to edit the podcast. And, we'll see how she does. And then, maybe we'll use some of it. And I bet we do. Might use all of it. She is one of those kind of kids that's just got a knack for stuff and a knack for technology. And it'd be great if she does this, and she'll probably put some Easter eggs in here. So if anybody sees the Easter eggs, make sure you call it out. We'll have to get some swag on the way to people if they find the Easter eggs.
There you go. It's kind of cool when you start to see them really grasp something and really push forwards with it. And it's like, wow, they're going to be way better at this than I am.
Way better. Do you want to guess what she's at summer camp for this week?
I'm afraid to ask.
No, it's crazy. I can't believe a kid would even be interested in this, and I can't believe they even have it. So she's at Villanova University this week, and the camp is business startup. So, so for 10 to 14-year-olds, and come in and learn how to run a startup and develop a business. And I'm like, yeah, if that's what you want to do, absolutely. Absolutely. And then tell me what you learned when you get back.
Yeah, I'm going to need that. So I was informed yesterday that my wife and daughter have been looking at a Vogue camp for my daughter for next summer that is actually in New York City. And I'm like, okay, what are we talking about? Are we talking about fashion? But it's got a bunch of different avenues. It's got the fashion stuff, design, but then it's got a business aspect too. And that's kind of where she's keyed in. So it seems like all these guys are starting to do that for kids. We didn't get that when we were kids. It's like, hey, here's a Ninja Turtle or something. Go play with that. I mean, it's a completely different world nowadays.
Man, it's a completely different world. And, we're still trying. I mean, I wouldn't say we're doing it perfectly. We're still trying to navigate it. The whole like being on devices thing.
Mm-hmm.
My God, so my daughter's 10, and then I have a son. He's 3 months old, and is quite the age gap. But now with him being here, a lot of my time and attention is going to him. So my daughter's having to entertain herself quite a bit, and you don't want her to just be on an iPad all the time. So like we restrict like how many hours you can even be on anything, whether it's PS5 or computer or iPad, whatever. It shuts off. So she just goes outside and rides her scooter or whatever, and then just hope. I don't know, man. We live in a good area, so you don't necessarily get too freaked out somebody's gonna snatch them up or whatever. But it's different. But when we were kids, parents didn't even know where we were.
No, I mean, we talked about that with my mom and dad the other day. It's kind of like, it's one of those deals there. It's like, man, we were kids. You kind of went outside, by 8, 9 in the morning during the summer, and you came inside when it got dark, and you may have came in to have lunch. I mean, it was a completely different world. And it's like, it's like I asked my mom and dad, and I was like, "Hey, did you guys even care?" Yeah, I mean, you just kind of threw us out there, but it was, but they didn't worry it now. And I think now some of that too is that we worry more about it because of the technology. I think a lot of that even translates back to the industry as well. Is that 20 years ago, a lot of the issues that were had or perceived with 1L wouldn't have been a big deal because everybody and their brother wouldn't have been talking about it. But now with LinkedIn and YouTube and TikTok and the one guy who had an issue, now, 9 million people have seen it, and, it just grows, and it doesn't have a chance to be fixed and organically work itself out the way things did, back when other technologies were introduced. And I think that's where things have changed so much. I mean, I remember being a kid and, listening to my dad talk about, the crazy stuff they were doing back then. He was the first plant in Metro Atlanta who used slag. And it was kind of, that was in the mid to late 90s. And, it's kind of a weird thing to think of now that we've been doing this for almost 30 years with that. And we haven't pushed that envelope a whole lot further than they did back then. So it's kind of tells you how slow the industry kind of changes at times.
Well, I'm in the world of like semi immediate gratification from like a business standpoint. So what is that? What do I mean? Like if we haven't got it figured out in a year or two, then we've probably got it wrong. And that's how I kind of approach things. And when I see that we made this switch nationwide all at the same time, we don't have to get into that. In 2022, we all start doing 1L. There's issues, and some people have more than others, but it's 4 years later. It's been 4 years of getting the same product, and we still haven't figured out in a lot of places how to solve these problems. And when I see that, that's like a giant red flag to me. That like we need to go back. And so when I didn't actually just heard this recently. Like, hey, I think we're all gonna go back to Type 1 too. I'm like, yeah, you had 4 years to figure it out, and we couldn't convince finishers that it's okay to do something different.
And I'm super stoked because I think, there's nothing better for a quality guy on the concrete side to know that we're going back to 1-2 and all my problems are going away. I mean, so we've heard for the last couple of years how that's been the whole cause to everything. So once we get back to there, we should have no issues at all in the concrete world.
Sure, none, not a single issue.
If it was that easy.
Well, now the cement guys can shift all the blame back to the admix folks. Be like, low brakes, shoot, man, call your chemical guy.
The admix guys are lobbying hard for 1L right now.
Interesting. I've had a couple of the admix guys reach out about wanting to focus on the calcined clays, and like, hey, they're like, hey, let's see if we can figure out what additives work best with it. Some I think are actually already putting stuff into the market that are specific for that. What other innovations are you seeing on that? I've been kind of out of the admix side of it for like a year. So what other innovations have you seen in the last 12 to 18 months coming out of those guys?
Yeah. The admix guys are definitely starting to look harder at admixtures that work well with different types of SCMs, whether it be calcined clay, pushing, the other things up, your traditional stuff, slag and ash. Some of them are even talking about, hey, do we have stuff that's going to help with biochar and things like that? So I think they're just now scratching the surface on that. Definitely think there's some things out there with the 585 that Sika's come out with seems to be more geared towards those type of products. And as we talk about LC3s and things like that, I think those products are going to push out very quickly and very rapidly. I think there's going to be an onslaught of admixtures that I'm testing over the next, 6 to 12 months, which is always cool because there's going to be something that we find there that works incredibly well. We're seeing an influx too with the strength enhancers. They've been out for a while. Master Builders came out with Exceed a good while back, and everyone else finally seems like they kind of caught up with that. But now we're seeing blends of polys with those strength enhancers in there, and then finishing aids and all that. So it's scary because I think we may be trying to get too much into one product. Sometimes I struggle with that on my side. I like to be able to blend and do things myself instead of having to, okay, it does all of this, because, anytime you put too much in there, sometimes things go wrong and you got to figure out what that issue is. But, usually if you've got them all separate, you can figure out which one's causing you the problem. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens out of some of those over the next little while.
Well, it's not just which ingredient or whatever can you tweak to quote unquote solve the problem, but not every mix needs that. It's not one solution for every mix. So the footers and the sidewalks and the columns don't all need the same stuff.
Exactly. It's which lever do you pull when, and that's going to be the struggle. I mean, like when we look at things and going forwards, we're dealing with crazy technologies that are rapidly deploying, and so much is changing. But what's not changing? The concrete plant's not changing. And the concrete plant is such a large investment that you're not going to see people be able to, put these things in the market as quick, because, if you've got a concrete plant that was built in 1975, you're still using it. And it's probably in a very similar configuration to what was built. And, that's 50 years ago, but it's a huge investment. So those are the challenges. You and I have talked about this with your product. It's got to have a silo.
Yeah.
And how many silos can you have? Will the scale hold all these different products? I mean, there's real challenges that come with that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that about the biochar actually. So I saw an interesting presentation a couple years back on biochar, and for those who aren't familiar, the biochar material is organic waste, and it's being heated up and then ground. And the key, it was interesting about this paper. The key that they found was a meta-analysis, and they were looking at the different biochar samples that had come out, and some worked really, really well, and some didn't work quite as well. And so biochar is almost like a catch-all for a bunch of different things that are being burned and ground and thrown into concrete. And so the sulfur content of the biochar was like the number one thing, and I thought that was really interesting. But as I got to like learning about some of these companies that were making it, the scalability is going to be a factor. But even when it's not a factor, let's say it's in, but now you're trying to use Portland cement, slag cement, calcined clay, biochar, fly ash. Is there a concrete plant in the world that's got silos to handle all that? I mean, I don't think they do.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that's going to be super, super challenging is, okay, which one of these makes the most sense? And then how many of them can you use? And then once again, back to your point earlier, they all are different scenarios. So, if you're looking at this one, it may be more structural. This one may be more of your light commercial residential type deal. And that it's going to be a challenge figuring out which one of those makes the absolute most sense for everybody going forwards. And it's challenging, a company our size, we look at things to where if we've got 30 plants and all these plants here in Atlanta that are super close to each other and they all share a lot of work. So if all these things start changing and all of a sudden, even with the cements, if you had a 1L, a 1T, a 1S, a 1P, how do you figure that out and make sure that all these plants can still, help each other on a daily basis and still do the things that you're there. So there's a lot of logistical challenges to all these changes we're starting to see in the industry.
Are these conversations happening at like the Georgia Ready Mix Concrete Association? Are you guys talking about this type of thing?
Yeah, I think everybody's starting to try to figure it out. If you look at it and you're looking at plants and things like that, those conversations happen internally and you're trying to figure out what the best, what's the best setup for your company going forwards. But it's unique and interesting. I mean, the computer systems are changing drastically on that side too. People don't realize that, but how many admixture slots do you have in your batch computer? And those are things that, everyone kind of condensed and went to fewer products, and now everybody's going back the opposite way. So it's a rapidly changing industry all of a sudden.
Yeah, it was. When we were doing Actigel, we're hooking that up. You'd run into plants that only had 4 slots, and you're like, "How do you only have 4?" And then you run into 6, 8, 12. Kind of ran the gambit. Some of these newer setups. I mean, I saw some installations that Grace put in Florida that were like the most beautiful admixture installs you've ever seen in your life. And these people had to have like 16 channels. I think they had 8 and they were piggybacking all of them. I mean, it just never seen so many containers in your life.
Yeah, it's definitely unique. I mean, it's I was one of the big proponents of, hey, less is more. And now I'm sitting here like, man, I need this, I need that, I need this. It's like, how many tools can I put in my toolbox all of a sudden? So it's and people change. I mean, as you see it there, you see things, things that work, and then you're like, hey, let me try this, and you see it work, and you're like, hey, I'm going to try to push this envelope farther, and how far can I get it? And then you're like, man, this is really great. Now, how do I make it work in the real world?
Right. And well, that, the whole like calcine clay thing, like, so the whole impetus to use the calcine clay is to lower the GWP value of the concrete.
Yep.
And there are a set of large buyers that are highly interested in that. But for the rest of the market, I wasn't sure that there was an appetite for that because it always comes at a cost. And I thought it was interesting that you're in a position where you work for a multinational company that, being based in Europe, they do value low GWP concrete maybe more so than a US based company might. So I sometimes I wonder if you yourself are kind of caught in this little like in between where maybe you're being uh, incentivized by the innovation folks from Europe on your side, but the market in the US maybe isn't there, but maybe it's kind of going there, maybe it's not. Maybe you could shed some light
Yeah,
on
it's
some of the behind the scenes there, what your opinion is.
man, it's one of those, I think, as you start to look at larger companies and everything, and it's where I've always been really, really fortunate is that Thomas breeds on innovation. I mean, like it says the concrete specialist on the truck. That isn't just a cool slogan. It's something we eat, breathe, and kind of go after it every day, trying to make sure we're proving that. And with it, yes, there's a lot of European influence, but we influence them as well. So, I mean, it's kind of back and forth. And it's one that we've gone here, especially you talk about calcine clay. We've always looked at that here and they kind of like, hey, it makes so much sense in Georgia because you're right on top of, the fall line, right there where there's such that big vein. It's like, hey, it's been here forever. When are we going to use it in concrete? And we've looked at this in my entire career, and just now it's starting to really come to fruition and people start to get kind of how this works. But, to go back to the Thomas deal, when I started with Thomas in 2001, they were already doing 50% replacement of Portland cement. And then you fast forward 25 years, and the average of how much cement we're replacing hasn't changed that drastically. So it's kind of unique. We do it different ways than we used to, but it's kind of unique looking at that and the fact that we were probably really, really early in that phase, but it hasn't grown. And it hasn't grown because of not having an appetite. It hasn't grown because of specifiers and owners. I mean, when you look at them and you talk to them, you're like, hey, can we go past this? And it's always just kind of been that hard line no. So, with ACI 318 changing here recently and the F3 exposure category going away, now there isn't that limit on SCMs. So that's kind of the first step to open that door to really push past it, because I think a lot of engineers, that was the safe spot. They knew they could kind of do that. And engineers now are more involved. I mean, GRMCA, we've got a couple of engineers who are sitting in with our technical committee meetings now. So that's huge because we're talking to them every day and we're having these conversations and really able to push that. But I think you're going to see that part start to grow. And now we just got to get the owners on board too. All the owners are really cool and really interested in the green aspect of concrete, but there are some scheduling concerns there. So they've got to start looking at that. Hey, how do we optimize this without affecting the schedule? How do we look at this? Or, is it worth the time to build a building, 3 months slower, knowing that it does as much, help to the environment?
So those questions are ongoing. What I never understood, like, what is the incentive for the engineer? So, because I'm a big believer that incentives drive outcomes, and
Absolutely.
and if the incentive of the engineer is to build the safest structure they can, then they would not be incentivized to go out on a limb and approve a mix that the concrete producer says will be okay with all these alternative materials in them. Have those incentives changed at all for the engineer to make them say, yeah, we should explore these new products?
Yeah, I don't know that the incentive there has changed for the engineer. I think people as a whole have changed enough to say, hey, these are things that we need to adjust for the environment. When we're looking at it, hey, if we go 100% Portland and all this, and your GWP is 450, why? So I think the engineers now are seeing it, and we've been really fortunate here in the Southeast. We've got a really, really strong, good group of engineers that have kind of looked at a lot of these things long before now. And I mean, we've been using 50% replacement by most of these engineers as long as I can remember. But now we're having those conversations. Hey, could we look at this? Hey, if we push to 60%, does that really bother you? And we've got data. So I think that's the key now too, is as the ready mix producers, don't just go try to change it. Show them how. If you go to them and say, hey, we need to use 70% replacement, have the data to show them why that works. If you don't have that, you're kind of wasting your time. And I think that's where we get lost sometimes. And some people's like, oh, this is a great idea. We saw this research paper. We can use 70% replacement, but have you done it? And once you've done it, it's a lot easier to get somebody. No one on that side wants to be the first, but they're definitely willing to jump out there once they know, hey, this isn't dangerous, isn't a safety concern, that people are really, really cool to go on and try it then.
Are these engineers that are open, like once you show some data and stuff, are they younger guys, older guys? You got a mix?
It's a mix. I mean, you'll be surprised. I think now it's kind of, I think you get the younger guys are really excited about it, but I think the older guys are the ones that adapt to it the quickest, because once they look at the data, they're able to digest it and understand that, oh wait, I see what you're doing here, and those things start to make a lot of sense. Kelly Roberts, who works for Walter P. Moore here in Atlanta, has been huge on that front forever, and she's been really easy to deal with on a lot of those things. She's going to hold your feet to the fire and say, hey, you've still got to meet these criteria, but she's open to it. And then, Rob Wallacker, who's over at Usen and Case, Rob's been one that we've done some pretty cool things on some jobs with, and he's really opened up. And I think all of these guys were really conservative by nature, because, being a quality guy, I'm conservative by nature, but once you start to see data and you see repeatable data, things then start to make a lot of sense.
Okay, that's super interesting. I was wondering. I thought maybe it'd only be the young guys, but you're seeing a mix. And the reason why I was curious about that also is 20 years ago, when I was coming out of undergrad, the engineers that were coming out then, concrete and materials, specifically concrete, was only like a part of their material science course that they would have. So a lot of these guys were coming out and they didn't really have a lot of concrete background, like at all. Like, and I don't blame young guys. Like even though I came out of concrete school, still didn't have a lot of background first coming out. Like, I'm not negative, but it wasn't hardly even mentioned a lot of times in the engineering. It was almost like an afterthought. It's like, oh yeah, you just order 4,000 PSI, but the important part is what size was your rebar and what was your spacing on your rebar. That was what was the most important thing. And so when we would take new things to engineers, it was a massive education. It sounds like it's maybe not that way anymore, or you're just dealing with folks that are dedicated to concrete. How's that working?
So I think a lot of engineers now they've grown. And like when I first came into the industry, kind of there was a divide between the engineer specifier and the ready mix producer. Like we even had problems getting break reports when I first started, because the engineers like, oh, if they see that their mix is performing really well, they'll pull cement out. And that never was the case. So I think now there's a more collaborative approach between the ready mix industry and the engineering community, to where we talk and we have conversations. And, I have engineers that will call me, hey, I've got this building, I've got this challenging part. What do you think? What do we need to look at mix design? What are the potential issues here? And then, same here, we approach them, hey, we want to try this. Is there a spot on one of your projects where we can push the envelope on this? And I think that helps. And I think, industry associations have helped that a lot. GRMCA here in Georgia's really opened up. We've got our technical committee now has engineers, we have contractors, we have testing labs, all on this one group, and that makes a big difference. Everyone realizes, oh wait, we all do want to accomplish the same thing. We're just coming at it from different directions. So I think those things have really opened up these areas to being more collaborative. I've made a lot of connections at local chapter ACI events, and then of course at national ACI. I mean, those things are so critical to be in those same rooms and have those conversations, and sometimes completely disagree with each other, but having enough respect for each other to understand why.
Have you already had your summer meeting for GRMCA? Is that already happened?
No, it's in July. So that will
July.
be in July.
Later in July. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, this podcast will drop on July 1st. So
Sweet.
later in July. So if you haven't already booked your ticket, you want to see Justin Lazenby in person, in the flesh. He's almost always at the GRMCA, usually running it. Are you still running it, or are you?
So I'm still over the technical committee. So times change. We've got people on the board, people tied up in other stuff. So we support the associations. That's one thing Thomas does a really good job at. We've got people spread out throughout the industry. We've got Jason Blythe, who's one of our GMs up in Raleigh. Him and I are both on the board of directors for NRMCA. I just finished up being chair for RES at NRMCA. My 2-year term is over there, so I get to sit back and heckle Bobby Dowdy and those guys now. So that'll be fun.
Bobby Dowdy. Yeah, man.
But then the same thing. I mean, some of our guys are spread through there. Ryan Chandler, our CEO, is on the MIT Sustainability Hub board. So I mean, we've got people plugged in kind of all over the place. That's one thing you've got to do. If you're going to be in this industry, support what the industry does and really help push it forwards. I mean, it's critical. I mean, it's really super cool to see a lot of these guys that I deal with daily that are competitors, even seeing them out at these events, because it's like, okay, hey, everybody's starting to get it. Everybody's getting plugged in and doing good for the whole industry.
Well, I mean, I don't know about Thomas as a whole, but if you're speaking for all of Thomas, or I'm talking about you for all of Thomas, you've always been really good about even guys that are competitors. It's really a frenemies thing where you've always been open about sharing. Maybe it's not 100% everything, but at least what you're seeing and where trends are going and what problems and sometimes even how you solved it, and really helping everybody out. That's really the way it should be, though. I mean, and I see that reciprocated from some of your competitors. They do the same thing. I'll talk to them and they're like, "Oh yeah, we figured this out." And I was like, "Do you care if I tell Thomas?" And they're like, "Nope, go ahead."
Yeah, I mean, that's the key. I think with certain things, I mean, like with 1L, I mean, let's be honest, 1L not being successful is bad for everybody. There's no win for anybody there. I mean, if we do go back to type 1, 2, the contractors are going to probably be like, "Oh, we were able to beat the cement company, but did you?" Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's so many things there that come into play, and I think we've got to be open-minded and always looking at that. And what's good for the industry will always be what's good for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. What I always think is super interesting about the concrete space is much time and attention as we'll put to mix designs and to technology and resources into research and R&D and innovation. At the end of the day, what matters is that guy that's at the end of the chute. What's his opinion?
Yep.
What does he think about what's that mud that's dropping on the ground? He's doing backbreaking labor, and if it's a pain in his rear end, he's going to call somebody else. And it does not matter how fancy or how nice or how dollar conscious or whatever it is. If that guy's not happy, then you don't have a business. And that, I like that when you and I talk, we never forget that, right? We always, our first thought is always like, if we load this thing up with whatever product, is that finisher going to be happy or not? And that's crazy. It's interesting to me when I look at the supply chain of the business and all that stuff. It all funnels down to that guy placing that concrete. And if he's not happy, brother, we're all out of work.
Exactly. And I mean, and knowing how that changes is super difficult too. I mean, you and I have done it a million times. How many times have we stood over a wheelbarrow with a mag float in our hand,
Oh my gosh.
seeing how that works, and then like, okay, let's look at this a little different, and then you pull out a wood float. I don't know how many people even use wood floats anymore, but they're really cool to look at things with and see how that different texture works the surface of the concrete. And I mean, it's different for every customer. I mean, it's not a one size fit all anymore. And forever we kind of looked at, okay, hey, this mix finishes well, so it's great. Well, that's great. Well, it finishes great for a residential guy, but that's not what the industrial floor guy wants. And then what works for the industrial floor guy, the residential guy's like, I'm never pouring this again. You're the worst ever. I mean, so finding that middle ground and seeing the industry evolve there. I mean, that's the thing people don't realize either is we get hung up on a lot of these things with cements and admixtures and all that, but the aggregates play a key role.
Mm.
And there's been no real changes in the aggregate world for a really long time, nor are there going to be. I mean, and that's the thing that's scary too, is there's only so much high quality aggregate that's out there. And how long is it before we start having huge issues with that? You can only pull so much out of the earth before those things become, a bigger problem. And we're dealing with recycled concrete aggregates and things like that are probably closer than we ever realize right now.
Well, yeah, I don't want this to be fear mongering on aggregate availability because I think we're a long way away from that. The probably the thing that would hold it up more than anything is permitting.
Yeah.
So permitting for additional quarries would probably be the single biggest detrimental factor. So whenever we do get to life of mine of some of these pits, that we're able to open up additional quarries, that would probably be the thing that would scare me the most. But like how much rock is in the ground? Jesus, bro! Like we are
There's
so
plenty.
blessed.
You and I are not going to have to worry about running out in our careers. Maybe my grandkids may have that problem, but yeah, I mean it's definitely something we have to start being mindful of. And how do we stretch that out? How do we make it better?
Well, hold on. I want to go back to something you said. You said we're not seeing a lot of changes in the technology when it comes to aggregates. So that's an interesting statement because we are seeing changes in the powders. We've seen all the changes in the chemicals.
Yep.
Seen changes in the way we monitor concrete, the way we test concrete, the way we pour it, place it, finish it. Those things have all advanced quite a bit in some cases, but the aggregates really haven't changed. Have you thought much about what could you change as an aggregate?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because there's so much there that goes into it. But I mean, at the end of the day, as a concrete guy, I would love to get extremely cubical aggregate, all day, every day that's super, super clean. And that doesn't work. We all know that the way aggregate fractures and it changes there's so many variables. But I mean, just, and I'm not somebody who's overly well versed in that, but when's the last time there was a huge change to crushing equipment? Or, have there been, innovations there? And it's probably something that
There's probably something. There's
Yeah.
probably something.
Yeah.
But for like me and you, are we seeing that or feeling that?
Yeah, are we hearing it?
No, we're not. We're not.
Yeah.
So here, the most interesting thing I saw in the last 15 years was there was a bunch of research done. Well, it was on concrete mixes, it's not on aggregates, but it was the change in the mixes was centered around aggregates. And what they did was they went from using 2 aggregates, a rock and a sand, to
Yep.
using 4. They had 2 rocks and 2 sands, trying to change the particle packing on the mix. And it made the most beautiful concrete, like all the cracking, like mixes that were just horrible with whether it was settlement cracks or plastic shrink. A lot of things were changing because they changed the particle size distribution of the entire aggregate portfolio, the entire aggregate envelope.
Yep.
And I just thought that was fascinating. And I was so excited when I saw that. And then, of course, I was young and dumb and naive. And I was like, this is great. We should all do this. And everyone's like, how many bins do you think I have, moron?
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah. That's a good point.
All the silos, it's bin capacity. And there's a lot of good that can be done there. And then it's the competing part there, like, man, I love putting some intermediates into my concrete, a 789 or an 89 stone, in there to help soften that mix up some. But man, those asphalt guys really like that material too. So it becomes a big challenge on who can get it where and when. So
Well,
so
the
yeah,
asphalt guys were smart. They put their plant at the quarry. They're like, "Oh yeah,
exactly.
we'll put it right here on the quarry, and we'll take all your fines, anything you got. You just throw them right in there."
And that's the key too. I mean, I know in certain parts of the country, guys get lost with the whole manufactured sand and not, oh, we can't use man, we've used manufactured sand at really high percentages in the Southeast for a long time. But I think that's one thing the agri guys do a fantastic job of here is they make a well graded sand, and it's not screenings. It's not, it's not things like that are a big difference when you start looking at that. And I think that's one thing we struggle with some specifiers and things too, is they'll be like, oh, we don't want wash gray sand. We don't want manufactured sand. And it's like, okay, tell me why. And they start telling you the issues they've had. And it's like, yeah, that's not truly a manufactured sand. That is a set of screenings or something that's being used there. And it probably wasn't ideal for your situation, but let me show you what ours looks like here. And a lot of times you can work through that, but there definitely some challenges there. But here in the Southeast, especially in Georgia, we're really fortunate that they understand how to make a really good, well distributed sand.
Well, I mean, as long as there's no mica in it and some of those Georgia sands, then you're all right. I mean,
if I ever figure out how to get mica out of the aggregate out of Granite, I'm gonna be a rich man.
Go up to Knoxville. There's no sand there. It's all man sand. They've been doing it that way for 40 years. And when you tell them there's another way to do it, or you tell them that you're having trouble, they look at you like like you're crazy.
Like, why? That doesn't make sense.
Did I ever tell you I was on a job in like the upper Northwest? Actually, I don't know if I was on it. I think Joey might have been on it, and he called me because he couldn't believe it. So I don't want to steal his story here, but I'm going to share it. And he was with the guy, and the guy was having issues. He couldn't make concrete with limestone aggregate. And he was like, I don't understand how you guys are making concrete with this cubicle shaped. It was like the most beautiful limestone aggregate you've ever seen in your life. And he was like, oh, and we're like, okay, well, hold on. What's wrong? And he's like, well, my whole life I've only used it like river rock, like rounded river rock his whole life. And now he's having to switch to limestone, and he couldn't make a good concrete. It was just interesting to see that everybody's got different problems.
Yeah, and it's unique to see that at times too. Like we back during the recession, back 07, 08, when things were really, really slow. Not that we didn't have things to do, because we had plenty to do, but we started trying to push the envelope and be ahead of things when things came back. And we got to reading a lot of research papers, and there was a lot of research on the really high strength concretes coming out of the Pacific Northwest. And I reached out to some people there. It's like, hey, I want to get some of your aggregate. I want to see how far I can push it. And they sent me this beautiful glacial aggregate from up there that's rounded, and it's got all these really cool colors and all this. And I'm like, hey, this is awesome. And then, what we ended up learning here is we were better at making high strength concrete with our crushed aggregates that were more angular, because that's what we understood. And we knew, we had a better idea of how that worked. We were finally able to adapt and make both of them work really, really well. So we never had to import aggregates from the Pacific Northwest to make high strength concrete. But it was still cool to see it and learn and figure those things out.
Well, we're still pursuing new things and learning things every day, man. It's really nice to catch up with you here. Is there anything else that you wanted the people to know about yourself or Thomas Concrete, or what's coming up before we get out of here?
No, I think everybody knows that side here. I mean, the industry's growing. The industry's getting better and better every day. Stay plugged in. If you need concrete in the Atlanta area, we're here. We'd love to get it to you. But then, hey, if you're in Charlotte or Raleigh or, upstate South Carolina, we're in those areas too. So we're spread out through the Southeast. Want to provide anything you've got. If you've got a patio, you've got a high rise, we pretty much know how to do all of those things. So we're always willing and able to figure those things out and make the most innovative concrete we can for this situation.
Yeah, and I was just talking to somebody this weekend. I didn't realize there were 18 ready mix producers in the Raleigh-Durham area. So, good luck to Thomas out there.
Yes, scary. And then when you look at that and see that many producers in one area, definitely felt by all of us up there.
Yeah, that's crazy. But I'm happy for the consumer. That's what you need. Need competition, need innovation, and there's nobody out there innovating harder than Justin Lazenby at Thomas Concrete. Thank you for joining the Slump Monkeys Concrete Pack podcast. Everybody, have a wonderful day and a wonderful start to the new era of concrete. It's the #1 concrete podcast. We're to the moon, Justin. We're going to the moon.
Launching off.
Please subscribe to the Slump Monkeys Concrete Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Visit us on LinkedIn, follow us on YouTube, and reach out to us at slumpmonkeys.com to inquire about sponsorships or guest appearances. Thank you and have a great week.